Thanks to everyone for being here. This is actually the last session of the Design Excellence Conference. 3 days of fun and Zooming. Hope your eyes are okay. But it's all been really great. So thank you for going on this ride with us. It's been pretty remarkable that we could pull it off so well with your attendance and with all of our great sponsors. So today's session is about Waterloo Park. Opening, I think we had on the agenda opening in the fall of 2020. I guess you're actually opening spring of 2021.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is great. The CEO of Waterloo Greenway and my dear friend, Peter Mullen, is kind enough to be here with us to tell us about it. I wanted to say thank you to all of our sponsors again. It's because of you that we did this whole conference. And I want to give a special shout out to Sierra Pacific Windows. It's a short video. Thank you, Sierra Pacific. Thank you, Channing, for sponsoring the conference and supporting AIA Austin.
Sierra Pacific, windows that never compromise. Our mission, to do it right, to never compromise, to make the best windows and doors you can buy in the most sustainable way possible, from seed to delivered product.
Thanks so much. All right, Peter, I'm gonna turn over the reins to you if you wanna share your screen and take it away.
Great. Well, thank you, Ingrid.
Sure.
Ingrid, it is a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. It's my dear friend, Ingrid, who has inspired us all on so many occasions, including being the curator of Creek Show for many years. So anyway, thanks for having me, and pleasure to be with this group. I will say that we've been fortunate to have, from the very beginning, incredible support from the design community. Much in the way, I will say, much in the way this happened with the High Line in New York, the design community is really, they were the first adopters of this vision and have kind of powered it along at various points along the way. So really grateful for that. I'm going to share my screen and get started. I have a few, other thank yous to start out with. One is just to the Waterloo Greenway staff, who really does all of the heavy lifting. In particular, I want to call out John Rigdon, who's our Director of Planning and Design, as well as the construction team, Kim Barker and Alan Bell, who are managing Waterloo Construction. They're really indispensable in sort of keeping the vision on track, and so really grateful for that. We also, have the benefit of having really terrific leadership as an organization. The founders of the Conservancy back in 2011, Melba Watley, Tom Meredith, Melanie Barnes, set out from the very beginning to make this a design-centered project. One of the primary pillars of this project was to bring great design and design excellence to this very ambitious project. And so that's been something that's guided us all along. And we have great partners in the community. The city of Austin is a primary partner, but we also work with a lot of other government agencies and also members of the community. This is a project that will succeed largely if the community adopts it as its own. And so we're really grateful for the community's participation in creating it. And I also want to give a shout out to Melissa Ayala, who is our community engagement manager on staff, because she is the one that's also helping day in, day out to make those connections. So we're very fortunate to have a really great team working on this project, and who are all driven by the mission to do something great for the city. I'm going to do a little bit of a quick overview of the project as a whole, for those of you that may not be super familiar with it. I suspect a lot of you are, but just want to give some context, and then I'll dive into Waterloo, and I'll talk a little bit about the history and the development of the design, and then show you what's happening right on the ground with construction. As Ingrid mentioned, we are scheduled to open Waterloo Park in the spring of 2021, and we hope that can be a moment that really celebrates the coming back together of our community. I want to acknowledge that this is really a really hard time for a lot of people, including many of you in this session. I think we as people, we're always trying to adapt and make the best of things, and we're really good at it for the most part, but it's important to acknowledge that this is a really strange and hard time, and we've got to try to use it to focus on our better selves. So I always try to do that, remember to be kind and generous, and to remember that we need each other. So and we hope that the opening of Waterloo Park next spring can be a celebration of that coming together for the entire city. So this is our footprint of our project is the lower stretch of Waller Creek on the east side of downtown. Oh, I should mention before I start, today is the 1-year anniversary of our rebranding and our renaming of our organization. We used to be called the Waller Creek Conservancy, and then a year ago we changed our name and the name of our project to Waterloo Greenway. The project really never had an official name, so we felt like it needed one, something that could embrace all of the different aspects of it. And so that was a year ago today. So sort of serendipitous timing for this talk. And our location is really crucial for how we see our mission, because while this project is going to have really dramatic effect on the immediate surrounding area of Austin, I think that it's also going to have a profound effect on a much broader scale. And that is our hope, is that our constituent base is not the immediate neighborhood, it's really the entire city and the region as well. And how do we use this public space and this new public realm, enhanced public realm, to really bring our entire city together? So being at the center of the city, in the middle of downtown, is really crucial for us, because we think that this is the place that can do that for our community. And in Austin, I think we've become even more acutely aware in the past few months about how that historically has not happened. In part because we have had let's say, an inconsistent public realm, and in some cases we've had public infrastructure that has served to divide us. And where our project is one of those dividers. Certainly, I-35 and Waller Creek itself has always been the kind of dividing line between East and West, and the discrepancies of experience and resources that have been defined by that East-West divide, and the racial enmity that has occurred over that line. And so part of our role as an organization is to see that location as being an opportunity, right, to turn what was a wall and make it a zipper, really stitching East and West together. So really taking that challenge head on and owning it, and that's a crucial part of our mission. We've been talking about Waller Creek as a community for a long time. I don't know if Sinclair Black is in the sessions today, but he in his drawing for Austin's creeks in the 1970s identified Waller Creek as a place for public infrastructure and a mobility corridor. So we've been talking about it for a long time, but really the game changer in this generation is the Waller Creek Flood Control Tunnel, which was completed in 2015 and now takes 28 acres out of the floodplain on the east side of downtown and enables us to rethink the relationship of Waller Creek and the public realm around it with the surrounding city fabric. So, the first thing we did was we had an international design competition back in 2011 and 2012. Which was won by a team led by Michael Van Valkenburg and Associates, landscape architects. And the vision for that was to create a new public space, public park system on the east side of downtown. North is to the right in this image. That would then be the thing that shapes the entire city around it. We're going to see a lot of new development in this part of the city. And so instead of seeing the public realm as like the garnish at the edge of the plate, how can we see it as the plate, the platform that enables and supports and orders everything that happens around it. I do want to also acknowledge that, you know, my role in this process is really as mouthpiece / cat herder. You know, the real engine behind this is the design team. And we're really fortunate to have an incredible team leading and working on this project. You know, on the landscape side, led by Michael Van Valkenburg and Associates, Gulliver Shepard is the principal for that office, who's been working on this consistently since 2011, 2012. They are collaborating with DWG, led by Daniel Woodruff and Eric Schultz and Kyle Grist on the ground. But then there's a whole other set of designers on the team as well. Tom Pfeiffer and partners of the architects for the amphitheater. Michael Shu's office are the architects for our restroom building. I'll show you that in a little bit. Really beautiful jewel of a building. We have great engineers in the project. AEC, Guy Nordenson out of New York. And we're also working with the Ladybird Johnson Wildfire Center on some of the landscape elements in a wetland. And so this team of really talented people and committed people is really, they're the ones that have brought this vision. And I'm really speaking on behalf of their work. It's their work, it's not mine. So just to, broadly speaking, the building blocks of this project overall, you know, are the following. And it starts with ecology and the creek itself. You know, the creek has been mistreated and neglected over time. It's the most urbanized creek probably in Austin. You know, you can see how it's been either forgotten or in some cases walled off from the city due to the history of flooding. Now that we have the flood control tunnel, we can, again, completely rethink that relationship and take those walls out, bend those slopes back, revegetate them, rebuild the stream bank as a place of nature, and open it up to the city around it. And so at the heart of the project, that's what this larger project is about. It's about reconstructing nature in the middle of an increasingly urban place. The second layer is about mobility and connectivity. Along that natural spine, we're building a continuous pedestrian and cycling trail that avoids conflicts with the street grid, so allows a new, you know, alternative mobility infrastructure in this part of the city. It includes a new pedestrian bridge over the lake at the southern end of the Waterloo Greenway Trail. Originally, this is designed to be a pontoon bridge. We'll see if that pans out. We're actually collaborating with Cap Metro right now on incorporating this into the plans in Project Connect for a transit bridge across the lake. So, you know, I'm excited about Project Connect, as I know everybody on this call is, and is going to be out there, you know, pounding the pavement on behalf of Project Connect. We need transit. Now is our time. Little plug there. But incorporating this, you know, pedestrian mobility infrastructure into that as well. And if you were able to connect to the larger urban trail network in Austin, and I think it's hard to really understand how profoundly these pedestrian connections can change the perception of the city, because they have the effect of essentially shrinking the city in people's minds. Nobody's walking from UT to the lake right now, certainly, or to South Austin. But when there is a shaded, cooler, beautiful public pedestrian walkway to make that connection, people will use it. And then it changes everything that happens in between those two destinations. So I think the possibility of creating this and the impacts that it can have or cannot really be overstated. So we've got the ecology layer, the mobility layer, and then that spine, that green and mobility spine, connects a series of places and parks along the route, two of which are existing, Palm Park and Waterloo Park, but two of which are new and will be created. And so each of these parks has different character and function, sensibility, context, but the sum of all which really create this really rich tapestry of experiences that allow us to serve a diverse public in a diverse set of ways. And the beauty of parks, as you all, I think, know, it's great to talk to the kind of the people that are in the family, but parks, the thing about parks is that they're so adaptable, right? They can do so many different things, and they can be places for events and gatherings. It's always a little disconcerting to see these kinds of images right now, but I firmly believe we will be back into this mode at some point, and we have to look forward to that. So Symphony Square is a collection of historic buildings on Waller Creek that's part of our system, and we renovated those buildings in 2018 and have brought programs and events back to that space. Our organization is not just about building parks and operating parks, but also activating them and programming them, and using programming as a way to make them more inclusive and welcoming. Creek Show, which some of you on the call may have participated in. It's our largest signature program that we have every November. We won't be having it this year, unfortunately. But we commissioned artists and designers to do light installations on the creek, and it's really given people a way to see the possibilities of what can happen along this public corridor. Last year we had 60,000 attendees. So the appetite for these kinds of experiences is pretty strong here in Austin. We have an annual pop-up picnic in Palm Park, free public program, but that's supported by the restaurant community. And again, not a great space right now, but when you fill it with people and add a little bit of, even just a little bit of design, it completely changes the perception of the place. And I think these kinds of events have helped us show that. Public art, huge part of our program. We have started commissioning works, including Forever Bicycles by Ai Weiwei, which we installed in collaboration with the Contemporary down by the Waller Creek Boathouse in 2016. But in addition to all that, these parks are places for quiet contemplation and being in nature and just being connected to nature. And we've seen the incredible health and wellness benefits, and particularly so in the last few months, of these kinds of opportunities and experiences. So in many ways, we see this project as a very large public health initiative that is crucial to the future of our urban city. And then in between those two poles of large gatherings and private moments, there's everything that you can imagine in between, and everything that you can't imagine. And the beauty of parks is that people make them their own. They don't do what we prescribe for them. They do what they want to do, and that's their beauty, is that they are these kind of open-ended platforms for the collective creative expression of the community. And that's really our goal: is how do we actually make this a place that can serve that purpose and design it in a way that facilitates that. And over the course of the past few years, we've also recognized that we cannot look at that as a kind of a passive activity, and that historically these parks and places have not always served the public equally or equitably. And we as an organization need to be very conscious about those disparities and do what we can to overcome them, so that this is a place that serves everybody and welcomes everybody. And to me, that's their real value, is that if this is a place where the entire community comes together, that's how we build a common sense of our humanity and community, and our connectedness to each other. And so that's part of why having this broad sense of a constituency across the city is so important to us. So that's the big idea: ecology, mobility, park spaces for coming together, and doing that for the entire city. So in terms of implementation, we have a phased capital project. We're under construction on phase 1 up at Waterloo Park at the northern end. We are already in construction documents on phase 2 at the southern end. So we have a kind of a rolling construction process. We hope to be in construction on that phase 2 next year. So with the goal of having the entire project complete by 2026, 2027. You know, one of the reasons we started at Waterloo Park at the northern end was that because it has all of the different components of the larger project embedded in it. There are large gathering spaces. There are areas where we're storing the creek. And there are park spaces of a variety of scales and sizes that allow us to serve the public in a variety of ways right out of the gate. So then in some ways, as a demonstration project for the larger project, this is a way to show people what's coming. And we've, you know, frankly realized that for a large part of our community, it's who don't read plans and architectural drawings, having a place that they can experience is going to be the thing that changes the perception of the project as a whole. So really looking forward to sharing this with the public generally and broadly. So I want to go through a little bit of history of the evolution of the design. It's pretty interesting to see how it's evolved over time. And I think you'll see some of the themes that emerge in that development. You know, one of the, let me go back because I forgot really to mention, you know, part of at the center of the project is the Moody Amphitheater, which is a fully functional 5,000 person outdoor amphitheater. You know, so we have a programmatic anchor, which I think also will attract people from a larger sort of radius around the center of Austin. So that's sort of one of the themes that I want to that's embedded in the evolution of the design, is taking a place that was, I think, and is consistent with some of our historic, you know, parks in Austin, is, you know, not intensively designed. Let's put it that way. You know, that we find these public spaces or these places, and they have some natural resources and features, but we've never designed them as urban places. And I think so part of the goal around Waterloo Park is to create a truly urban park that has a lot of features, amenities, experiences packed into a smaller footprint. So Waterloo Park, when we started, this is, you know, again, 12th Street on the south, 15th Street, the north, Trinity Street on the west, Red River Street on the east. And, you know, Waterloo Park was created in the early 1970s as part of a broad urban renewal area in this area just east of the Capitol. But you can see that there is, you know, it's a pretty loose design fabric when we started. Big lawn in the middle that was a place that did host a lot of events. And then a kind of a grove of trees, a lot of oak trees on the site, centered around Waller Creek, and some stone paths that kind of meander around it. This site is the site of the inlet facility for the Waller Creek flood control tunnel. And so again, this is kind of the pebble in the lake that has a series of ripple effects that inform a lot of what we're doing. And is a giant piece of infrastructure in the middle of the park. And so a lot of the design is based about how do we respond to that and also get inspired by that. So if you think about, obviously Waller Creek is about flow and the flow of water, but also landscapes are often really about flow and the flow of surface, you know, through space in 3 dimensions. And then the tunnel in some ways is like this thing that has interrupted the natural flow of the creek and the landscape, but that spawns a whole series of geometric and programmatic reactions. So the idea that out of that interrupted flow come a series of pathways that meander their way through the site fluidly, and that those pathways then create a series of places, kind of eddies along those paths that both navigate the topography, but also create programmatic opportunities along the way. So just, I mean, again, going through a little bit of history here on the evolution of the design. And I actually want to thank Ingrid for this opportunity, because, you know, you don't always get the opportunity to get into this level of detail in the design process. And I thought this was an audience that would appreciate it. So, this is the park overlaid with the tunnel construction, with the inlet facility, and then the pond that flows into the inlet, into the tunnel. The first big move that the design team came up with was basically to build the park out over the pond, right? And to kind of take the park back from the tunnel. So instead of having a piece of infrastructure with a bunch of green around it, we now have a park with a large piece of infrastructure in it. So inverting that relationship. And so here you can see the lawn, flying lawn that extends out over the pond, the sort of disc-shaped lawn that's now complete. And there it is from above. And really, again, taking the park back from the inlet facility and then creating a whole series of other programmatic opportunities. So once that move was done, then the question was, how do we actually carve out spaces within the park? Knowing that this is the biggest park in the chain, that this could be a gathering space for the center of Austin. I've been reminded by a couple of folks who worked on the Music Commission back in the 90s that people have been talking about a 5,000 person amphitheater in Austin, downtown Austin, for a long time. So we were happy to be the recipient of that vision. And also the idea of creating an architectural anchor in the park that could have symbolic value, right? That would mark this place and also make it a destination architecturally. And so out of that was born, in the competition design, Tom Pfeiffer's vision for what was at that point called the Poppy, which really was a sculpture as much as anything else, but a place for gatherings, but really did not have any kind of specific programmatic function, but was the idea that this would be a visible architectural element in the park that would be an attractor. And so that was the kind of the genesis of the idea of a piece of architecture in the park. And over time that has evolved both in terms of the location, but also its function. So it started out on top of the inlet facility in the competition, in part to kind of hide the inlet facility. That was not possible functionally or programmatically. We know the inlet facility has had some history, so that really wasn't possible. So then the Poppy started to move. And so we then see a whole series of progressions in terms of the development of the plan itself around the location and the function of that architectural element. So jumping ahead a couple of years, the Poppy has been transformed into something that's a little flatter and has started to gain some more functionality programmatically, recognizing that just having a pavilion was great, but having a pavilion that could actually host concerts and performing arts events would be better. And so this idea of this organic and distinctive sort of leaf-shaped structure that was essentially like a tensile fabric covering around a steel frame built on a series of large pillars. Now, one of the things you can see is that this is still very much just a shell, right? It's not a building yet. And it's kind of floating in the landscape, and the landscape is very Arcadian. And beautiful, but hasn't really come to terms with, I think, the programmatic realities of being a performing arts space. The other thing is that as that was being developed, we recognized that, we have to deal with the Capitol View Corridor here, which limits the height of the building. And so the idea at the time was that this building would actually be on hydraulic lifts, so that during park mode, it would be below the view corridor, but that for a show, then the whole structure could lift up to provide the height and functionality required. So once we dug into the legality of that we realized that was kind of questionable within the state's Capitol View Corridor ordinance. So we had to kind of start to rethink things a little bit. The other thing is that we also realized that if we're going to go to the extent to build this kind of facility, we should really do it. The thing that's missing in Austin is a performing arts venue that has the infrastructure built into it. We have a lot of spaces where we do festivals and we bring out temporary infrastructure, but they tend to also have really destructive impact on our parks. And so if we could actually build in some of that infrastructure permanently, it would both facilitate the performing arts program, but also reduce the impact on the park itself. And so that led to a couple of things. One is the development of the amphitheater as a building, and also moving it slightly to the north along Trinity Street, basically to be able to maximize the amount of height we could get underneath the view corridor. And so that became the kind of defining element for the location of the amphitheater and the development of the building around which the landscape could be shaped. And that's a little bit of an overstatement, because I think one of the hallmarks of this whole design process and the design is that the building and the landscape are really integrated as one. And that's been a primary goal for us all along, in part because, you know, we wanted the landscape to always be the primary experience. And so the building had to function sort of as a piece of landscape, but also so that when we weren't in show mode, or the amphitheater wasn't being used for a performance, that it wouldn't feel like a place that was empty and lost and forlorn. That really felt like it was part of the park. So this idea of a kind of a park first design strategy emerged. So I want to talk a little bit about the evolution of the amphitheater building itself and the architecture of that. So this is the roof plan, and you can see how underneath the building, there's the plan. It includes all of the functionality for this kind of a program, you know, green rooms, dressing rooms, bathrooms, concession areas, loading dock, crew areas, catering, et cetera. And all of that is built kind of underneath the landscape, embedded into the topography of the site. And that allows us then to create a whole series of roof terraces and landscapes that cover it on top. And those are all occupiable, so the building again becomes part of the landscape and a landscape unto itself. And so this is the landscape plan that is being built. So you can see the Great Lawn in the middle. This is the outline of the amphitheater building, and you can see how much of it on the south side of the site is built into the hill, and then it starts to emerge out of the hill on the north side with the loading dock and these roof terraces. The form of the amphitheater structure, you know, has evolved quite a bit over time. The inspiration was really, how do we create something that can mimic the effect that the tree canopy has in the park? So allowing, you know, light to filter through it so that it's a kind of ephemeral thing and not a big, heavy structure. And looking at some art inspiration for how to take that idea and then abstract it. So Agnes Martin and her incredible canvases that have both, in spite of their minimalism, this incredible depth and a way of capturing the light and refracting it. And so that the building and the canopy structure becomes almost like a light fixture itself, as a way of, again, taking that abstracted tree canopy and then making it into architecture. But that when you get afar from it and away from it, it just is something that is floating and is a little bit like a cloud. So we're again trying to dematerialize the architecture as much as possible. And so the scheme was to create this multi-layered trellis of steel beams, actually 16 layers that are stacked up on one another, and using very small individual members so that it has a kind of delicacy. So they're, you know, 6 to 8 inches in depth, but that combined together that they could actually provide the structural capacity both to make the necessary spans, but also to hold up the rigging and all the equipment that's required for performances. And that also allowed us, by using that kind of structural methodology and typology, allow us to actually be playful about the shape of this and more organic about the shape of it. So looking at different ways in which the plan profile of the amphitheater, of this structure, could adapt and respond to the landscape around it. And so we ended up with this kind of organic form that hovers over that base building that houses all of the programmatic functions of the amphitheater. But that is something that becomes a park pavilion and is usable by the public all the time, not just when we're in show mode, but when it's just part of the park. And here are some model shots of it. Again, this is all done by Tom Pfeiffer's office. And you can see how this structure allows us to have a very thin profile, and all of that was about getting underneath the Capitol View corridor, and how it starts to capture the light, and then how it looks from different angles. And you'll see that you actually on the site you have the ability to have these different views of the structure. So it's something that's visible from all sides. So we're under construction. This is a recent photo from a few weeks ago. So you can see the canopy structure that's built, and then the curved concrete walls of the building underneath it that house all the different spaces, and then the landscape around it. Now I got a lot of construction photos, so I'll take you through the site. We're in the shadow of the Capitol, obviously, so pretty spectacular site here. Somebody said it's a little bit like the backdrop at ACL, but in reality. And this is just taken from Monday, and you can start to see that a lot of the form of the amphitheater area and the great lawn are now coming into shape, and we're putting in soil, and trees are being planted. And so the form of this is really now finally coming together. So view of the structure upon coming in off of the 14th Street Bridge, with the concrete walls underneath, and you can start to see how the play of light coming through the structure, and both also within the trellis itself, and it's constantly changing depending on time of day and where the sun is. So sometimes it's backlit, sometimes it's being lit from the front. And then because the walls underneath it are curved, you get these kind of warped shadow effects, which are really, really beautiful. This is a view from one of the roof terraces looking down onto the stage. All of this will be open to the public during normal park hours, and then when we have a show, we'll put up curtains around the stage to kind of screen off the performers from above. There are stairs and a ramp that come down off of the stage onto the lawn, so that again the stage is publicly accessible during normal park hours. Again, you can see some of the details of the structure and how it floats above those curved walls. And the curved walls, which will have vines growing up them, really just become kind of part of the landscape and the kind of part of the earth. One of the great things about construction is some of the details of the experience that you really never talk about during the design process emerge as well. So seeing the shadow of trees being cast onto these curved concrete walls, again, not a view that we ever saw during the design process, but just really beautiful moments that are now can be experienced on the site. And as I said, there are all these different perspectives you have on the structure. This is from Trinity Street looking south. And so you get this view from underneath, this sort of floating, again, cloud with the light sort of coming through it. But then from the south looking north, you're actually above it, and you get a totally different view of all these individual beams with the football stadium, UT football stadium in the background. And then in the middle, there is an at-grade connection with Trinity Street onto the roof of the building. This is one of the entrances into the park, where you come in underneath the structure, and there's a series of stacked, you get closer to those series of stacked beams, and you get to really understand the kind of the dimension of those. There's a much more intimate feel. But then at night in the sunset, the canopy again gets lit up. All these little beam edges get lit up, and you start to see the kind of three-dimensionality of the structure. So that's the amphitheater part of the park. But then to the south of that, there's a whole other experience, which is about something completely different from the amphitheater itself. And it's really about being immersed in a landscape at the same time that you're in the middle of the city. We have a lot of topography on the site. There's a huge elevation drop from Trinity Street down to the creek. And so the design is really centered on taking advantage of that and leveraging that to create a really rich variety of experiences of the landscape. So there is this curved serpentine walkway that curves through the site. I'll show you some more images of that, that then defines a series of places along the way. There's a secondary path that winds its way down through the hill. Again, all of that is accessible to create a kind of easy way of navigating this very steep hillside. But everything else in between is all planted as a really rich, robust landscape. And so, and we call this the Hill Country Garden. So this is really about how do we bring the hill country into the city. Here's another view of that same garden looking east. That's the inlet facility in the background with the walkway coming down, and then the Hill Country Garden here. And we've got, I think, a critical mass of landscape here that you really, in certain places, will just lose the city entirely. And I think this will be a really powerful experience to kind of just, step out of the city and then be in this really lush landscape. There is what we call a limestone scramble that weaves its way through that landscape, really for kids, as a way of experiencing and getting sort of exploring through that landscape. We also have a series of lighting that's in the landscape so that it will be lit at night and can be experienced at night. We're downtown. We know we have a nighttime experience, so that's part of that landscape experience as well. There you go. You see there these lights called firefly bollards. So they're perforated, so they have a kind of atmospheric quality in the landscape. And all of this obviously will be planted out with a series of grasses and perennials and shrubs. The serpentine walkway that navigates through the site, when going back to the original design idea and this idea of flow and flow interrupted and then spawning a whole series of curved walkways, and that formal device is employed in a whole variety of ways, shaping and carving the landscape as you move through it. So the walkway starts on the ground and then becomes this elevated structure. So you're kind of floating in the tree canopy. And then you have these sort of expansive views out over the rest of the park. And then it comes in and kind of winds its way back underneath itself, and sits on a series of these sort of interspersed small columns, again, that will be surrounded by plantings and kind of disappear into the landscape. Want to give a shout out to the folks at AEC and Architectural Engineers Collaborative for their design of the bridge itself. It has this kind of curved belly shape with this very thin profile at the edge. It gives it this incredible sculptural quality. And then as the walkway comes down, it creates a series of spaces, including this mini amphitheater, where we have a series of stone seating steps, which will be available for smaller programs, but also street performers and buskers that are all visible from the walkway as the walkway winds down around it. And there's a view from underneath the walkway looking at that plaza. There's another view of the walkway curving around, creating that space as it moves down. So a lot of shaping of the landscape, creating this hill that then facilitates this meander through the site. I think one of the hallmarks of the design is that to recognize that landscape is something that the experience of which can be choreographed. It's not just something that's found, it's something that can be a designed experience, and bringing that to the design of this park. So as the walkway winds down, then it comes into the middle of the park, and there are a series of play structures that are embedded into the landscape. It's not a playground per se, but it's a signal to kids that the landscape is something to be played in. And so it's an invitation to explore and discover the landscape. One of the elements is a granite slide, CNC milled out of granite, that is embedded into the hillside. So the hillside will all get built up around the slide with limestone and plantings. And you can see them assembling it into place actually just last week. And then at that same area, so that center of the park is where all those play structures are. And then just to the west of that, in this area here, we have a a public restroom building and a series of hookups for food trailers that are being designed by Michael Shu's office. And I want to give a shout out to his team, Maya Kreischman and Andrew Bell, for their work on this. A really beautiful piece of work that they've done. We started out this idea about we wanted to have food service amenities in the park, and we started out with an idea about maybe we should build a full brick and mortar restaurant. And we actually went out to the community, and the community said, it would be much better and more Austin if we could do something that was had a little bit of a lighter touch. And so we have hookups for food trailers, so to facilitate that, and then we're providing public restrooms to support that. But it's all about, again, being built into the landscape. And so these are some of the precedents for how we could take a piece of architecture and really embed it into the landscape and make it really almost of the landscape, but have a clear material distinction between the built architecture and then the natural landscape around it, and have those two elements be in sort of material dialogue with one another. So here's the plan. You've got the pavilion that's, again, embedded into the hillside here. There are hookups for these two food trailers, and then there's a big wooden deck under two large heritage trees where we can have flexible seating. And then the play area is just adjacent to that here. So that's a rendering of the building. Again, it's incredibly beautiful, minimalist structure, cast in place concrete with this kind of knife edge roof detail and a clear story window. And then in the middle of these two sides of the structure, there's a breezeway with a common wash basin sink. So very inclusive bathroom design. And then at the back, there is a skylit planter so that you really feel that this is part of the landscape. And there's this very intense relationship between the landscape and the building. So that's the structure, recent construction photo. Really, it's just an incredibly beautiful small building. You can see the clear story detail there and how it's embedded into the landscape. And then how from the inside, the roof kind of floats up above the wall structure. And then that's that breezeway with the cast in place concrete sink in the middle. That's coming. And then adjacent to that, there's a large wooden deck underneath the trees. And again, this is all on the main path into the park. And so it will be an integral part of the circulation experience. So we've got this like hub of activity right at the center of the park. So this is a place that will be activated all the time. We are heavily into the planting right now. Where Cleanscapes is our landscape contractor, and it's amazing to see what they are able to do. We've actually transplanted a lot of trees within the site, and also we've received some from outside of the site. We got 2 heritage trees from UT and 1 from the Capitol complex and 1 from an adjacent development. I think these are really adding a sense of permanence to the site that a new landscape sometimes doesn't have. So you can see these large trees have been located really strategically to kind of anchor and define the various spaces of the park. Lastly, just want to go over some of the creek restoration work that we're doing and some of the sustainability features of the site. So north of 14th Street, between 14th and 15th Street, there used to be a trail at creek level, but like many trails, and because we're upstream of the dam, here's the inlet facility here, downstream, the creek is flowing from right to left. This is an area that is subject to some, differentiation in flow levels. And so we've actually taken the path out of the creek and moved it to the top of the bank. As part of the construction of the adjacent site on the Central Health site, Red River Street, existing Red River Street will be pedestrianized. So that becomes part of the trail network, the larger trail network of the project. And so, there you can see that existing trail that we're taking out. And so this is a site that's really all about that creek restoration, creek reconstruction, going in and stabilizing the bank and then building it back up, but using natural materials and soft engineering solutions, stumps, dead wooden logs as a way to stabilize the stream bank, but also to provide habitat for a really diverse set of wildlife, creating places where the water moves at different speeds, because that again contributes to that biodiversity. So that's a whole sort of project unto itself. We're also, there's a lot of infrastructure under the ground that we've installed. All the bathrooms on site, and we have a lot of bathrooms for the amphitheater, are being served by the city's Purple Pipe reclaimed water system. There's a giant cistern underneath the lawn. Then that feeds a series of rain gardens at the southern part of the site. So again, we're keeping as much, if not all, of the water that falls on the site. It's best practice. And then all of that kind of, comes together and gets revealed as this, landscape. So as I said, we're well on our way here. We're hope to be finished by the end of the year and open in the spring of next year, and hopeful that coincides with an opening up of the city in general, so that we can really use this as a place to celebrate that together. So again, I want to thank the design community for its support over many years. The opening of Waterloo was really kind of a major milestone in the trajectory of the larger project. I think it's kind of a coming out party for us. I mean, I think the broader community is going to understand us better than ever before. But really the design community has been crucial in supporting us and getting us to this point. And I also just want to thank all the members of the design team, many of whom I haven't mentioned, who have contributed to this. An incredibly complex project. I think, but something that I hope that they're as proud of as we are. So there's that list again. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Peter. That was amazing. And what you're doing for Austin is just tremendous. I can't wait until this park is open, until the whole Waterloo Greenway project comes to fruition. We have a question.
Great.
Andrew Clements, and thank you, Andrew, asks, Capitol View corridors being the history that impacted the poppy being on top of the inlet structure, he's wondering about that.
Yeah, so, I think in the competition, I don't think the design team truly understood the Capitol View corridors. And so when all the kerfuffle about the inlet facility having violated the Capitol View corridor came out, I think they realized that the poppy was also, as a very vertical element, was also not going to be compliant with the Capitol View corridor. And so that, I think the goal was, everybody was very attached to the idea of the poppy and what it represented as a kind of an architectural element. And the question was, how do we actually adapt that and evolve and develop the design so that it could retain that kind of character and value and impact, but yet comply with the Capitol View corridor requirements. You're muted, Ingrid. Ingrid, you're muted. No, you're not.
Thanks,
There you
sorry
go.
about that.
That's right.
Bud Frank asks, do you know if any materials other than steel were considered for the amphitheater canopy?
It's a great question. So, and I'm going to apologize if there are members of the design team who are in the session today, because sometimes I oversimplify things in the explanation. Canopy is actually, it's a combination of steel and aluminum. During the design process, there was a lot of back and forth in terms of, all right, how do we optimize the structure, both in terms of weight and capacity to weight ratio, but also in terms of cost. And so it was steel, and then it was aluminum, and then it ended up being a hybrid structure so it's a combination of the two.
All right. I don't see any more questions. Does anybody have any other questions for Peter? Comments? Oh, there's one. Yep.
Well, just please, I guess my parting message would be, stay with us, right? Please, because this project only succeeds if the community is really engaged in it and behind it. And so you are now all officially deputized as ambassadors of the project. So please, spread the word, get people excited about it, and stay engaged in the project to whatever extent you can, because really that's how we're going to be most successful.
Great. Here's a question from David Goujon. Has the overall project schedule, for example, the lower Delta section, been impacted by COVID?
Not so much. I mean, I think we saw a little bit of impacts on the construction side, although we were able to work continuously. So we're actually, and really the city has been a huge driver in this too, accelerating the second phase, because we think it's going to be a good contracting environment, right, in terms of going out to the market. So, and we, the city has appropriated the money for that phase, and so we're going to move forward. So the short answer is not really.
Great. Chris
Yeah.
Nolan asks, how did losing a hard or waterproof roof over the pavilion affect the decision? What means the decision?
Well, so I didn't really, maybe I skipped over that. We knew that we had to provide weather protection for the stage, right? And so there's a glass roof as part of that lattice work. So I may have skipped over that. And that was a whole other material thing, because it was ETFE for a while, and then it was glass, and there was ETFE, and then it was glass. It's glass, right? So there's a series of glass shingles that are built into that lattice structure. And then they feed a series of gutters, and then actually those gutters feed a series of downpipes, many of which are embedded inside the steel columns that hold up the structure itself. So there's a whole, drainage structure built into the roof, because we had to provide, weather protection for the stage. The goal was how to make that feel almost invisible and to sort of help it sort of go away, right? So one of the reasons why the glass doesn't go out to the perimeter was that you really just perceive the structure as being completely transparent, and then you don't really you're barely aware of the glass itself. Does that answer your question?
I think it does.
Maybe.
Good question.
Okay.
And a couple of people are asking about who will manage the programming at the amphitheater, and will it primarily be concerts or other plans for other performing arts?
Yeah. So, Waterloo Greenway will manage the amphitheater. We have a partnership with C3 and Live Nation to produce, up to 35 concerts a year in the amphitheater. Our goal is to complement that with a whole range of other performing arts, so that we really have a diversity of performing arts. So the ballet, the symphony, Shakespeare, poetry slam, the sitar festival, local music. Again, I think that's going to be an ongoing sort of discovery process to figure out how we do that, and how we can afford to put on as much of that for free as we can for the community. But that's the goal, is that we really have a diversity of different offerings.
That's amazing. Rita asks, what are the plans for work on the other segments of Waller Creek? Is there a schedule for starting the future phase of the project?
Yeah, so the next phase, the first phase opens next spring. Second phase under construction next spring. That'll probably be a 2-year construction process, so opening in 2023. The next phase of work will probably be Palm Park, which is directly adjacent to that second phase down at the southern end. I will say we've been a little bit on hold with Palm Park because of the uncertainty around Palm School, and something that we're eager to see how Palm School can really fulfill its opportunity as a public place and not just a development site. And so there is a planning process in place that the city is running that kind of piggybacked on the convention center expansion planning process that UT conducted, a year and a half ago, to look at, all these different elements, how they hang together, including Palm School, right? So we need to get a better idea about what's going to happen with Palm School. That will inform what happens at Palm Park. Also, to be honest, the fact that I-35 is in play again and is going to be lowered adds a whole new dimension that we need to coordinate with and respond to. So, I think all these pieces, our goal is how do we make all these pieces work together, right? Because it's really one idea, right? This is about how do we make a more sort of intelligent, integrated, and when intelligent, I don't mean like digitally intelligent, just a more well-considered public realm where all these pieces are working with each other and not just independent or against each other. So, so that's put a little bit of a wrinkle into some of our later phases because we need to be integrated with some of those things that are happening around us. So Palm Park, let's say we can get that into construction in 2023, right? So that would be maybe 2024, early 25, and then we go into the middle. The Project Connect, got to make another plug. If assuming that is successful on the ballot in November, I think we'll see the pontoon bridge and the crossing over the lake that get accelerated because obviously that's a crucial part of the blue line. I don't know what the timetable is on that. It's probably multiple years away, but so that's how it's all going to work. And I think the middle section, we've got some more work to do on that from a design perspective. Obviously, the connectivity is key. The park that sits between 7th and 9th Streets on the site of the existing police station called the Refuge. Again, I thought that would be the last thing that we do, but it too has gotten some recent attention from City Council because the desire to accelerate the reimagination of the police station, given everything that symbolizes and how that the reimagining of that site could be a really important act of healing for our community. So so a lot of activity all around us. The innovation district at the northern end, I need to talk about that. That's starting under construction up by the med school. So all these pieces are in play and we're coordinating with the Downtown Austin Alliance and our other partners, Red River Cultural District, the MAC master plan is underway as well. Sort of everything is happening and sort of coming together all at once, which is incredibly complicated, but also incredibly exciting. So, and evolving.
Amazing. Shelby Blessing asks, how does the design address or not the needs of those experiencing homelessness?
Yeah, so huge issue, right? I think that my hope is that this project brings.
Peter, you're muted all of a sudden. Oh no. Peter.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're
Is that
back.
working?
Yeah, we lost you.
Okay, sorry.
Back.
Sorry. What I was going to say is I hope that this project helps to shine a much brighter light on what is really woefully inadequate infrastructure serving that community. I mean, we have 120 city managed shelter beds in a city of 1 million people. I mean, it's not appropriate, right? So, and I think the city is really working hard to try to come up with new infrastructure and new plans to better serve that community. I think like a lot of things in our city, it was an issue that was a little bit out of sight, out of mind, because this was an area that a lot of people spent time in. And now they are. And so now everyone's coming to realize, wow, we've got a real problem here. And so we got to deal with it. So I think there are kind of short-term, medium-term, long-term issues. Certainly in the short term, we've got to be an advocate for that community and getting better infrastructure. There's certainly on-the-ground issues that we're going to have to manage. But longer term, we've got to do a better job as a city, as a community. And the good news is that our numbers are still small enough Megan, and just if we want to be a cold-hearted statistician, our numbers are small enough that we can still get ahead of this issue, right? We could build enough housing to support this community. We just have to decide that we're going to do it and do it.
Wonderful. Anastasia Reed asks, would you please consider putting your energy and expertise into rallying to get a bridge to connect the north and south sides of Lake Travis? Maybe that's a little bit outside of the realm of Waterloo Greenway.
One step at a time.
Great. Lots of compliments from Lori Limbacher, Stephen Colson, Andrew Clements, Eric Rouser, Marie Legg, all kinds of people giving a shout out. Thank you so much to everyone. Oh, Daniel Woodruff asks, what is your favorite space in Waterloo Park? Thanks, Daniel.
That's not, you know, it's still up for grabs. I think that the Serpentine Walkway is incredible. It's amazing. It's just incredibly, and the way that it shapes the landscape around it is really incredible. I love the restroom building that Michael and Maya and Andrew have designed. So, but I think one of the things that's really shaped up nicely about the project is that even though we have all these different designers working on the project, the pieces really hang together nicely. Like they're all part of a family, and it doesn't feel like a theme park of architecture. It really feels like an integrated design. You know, I credit the designers for having figured out how to make that work. So, including you, Daniel. So, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much. This is a great headliner for the end of our conference. And I just want to thank you, Peter, for everything you're doing for us. This is wonderful. And thank you, everyone, for coming. We pulled it off. It was a great 3 days. Everyone, I would love to have a drink with you now and celebrate, but we'll all have to have drinks on our own and raise a glass. So thank you. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
Ingrid, thank you for having me. Great job, as always.
It's wonderful to have you. So everyone have a great weekend. And I'm sure we'll be up to something crazy next week. So see you then. Bye.